Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the research station's corridor, her breath coming in short gasps. The emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red, and the distant sound of tearing metal echoed through the ventilation system. 3 days ago, the mining colony on Kepler 442b had gone silent. 2 days ago, the rescue team had arrived to find nothing but blood and scattered equipment. Yesterday, they had discovered what killed everyone. The creature they found in the lower mining tunnels defied every classification in the galactic database. 8 feet tall when it stood upright, covered in chitinous plates that seemed to absorb light itself, with 6 limbs that could function as either arms or legs depending on need. Its head was elongated, almost serpentine, with rows of crystalline teeth that could cut through titanium alloy. The research team had dubbed it Apex because everything about its design screamed ultimate predator. Elena had been part of the xenobiology team sent to study the creature after the military managed to capture it. The thing had been wounded during the fight, missing one of its secondary arms and leaking a strange luminescent fluid that served as its blood. For 48 hours it had remained motionless in the containment cell, and the researchers had assumed it was dying. They were wrong. The breach happened during the night shift. Elena had been in her quarters reviewing tissue samples when the alarm started screaming. By the time she reached the lab, half the security team was dead, and the creature was nowhere to be found. That was 6 hours ago. Now she crept through the darkened corridors trying to reach the communications array to send a distress signal. The main power had been cut, along with most of the backup systems. The creature was methodical in its destruction, cutting off escape routes and isolating the remaining survivors. Elena rounded a corner and froze. At the end of the hallway, illuminated by the emergency lighting, stood Marcus Chen, one of the junior researchers. His back was to her, and he seemed to be examining something on the wall. Relief flooded through her. "Marcus," she whispered urgently. "Thank God you're alive. We need to get to the communications room." Marcus turned slowly, and Elena's relief transformed into horror. His eyes were gone, replaced by empty sockets that wept the same luminescent fluid she had seen from the creature's wounds. His mouth hung open, revealing that his tongue had been replaced by something that writhed and pulsed like a living thing. "Elena," Marcus said, but his voice was wrong, layered with harmonics that made her teeth ache. "Come closer. I have something to show you." She backed away, her hand fumbling for the emergency plasma cutter on her belt. Marcus had been infected, changed somehow by contact with the creature. As she watched in growing terror, his skin began to ripple and shift, revealing glimpses of chitinous plates beneath. The apex didn't escape. Marcus continued, taking a step toward her. "It evolved. It learned. And now it's teaching us." Elena turned and ran, her footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. Behind her, she could hear Marcus following, but his gait had changed. Instead of footsteps, she heard the clicking of claws against metal. She burst into the communications room and immediately began working the manual controls. The main transmitter was dead, but there was still the emergency beacon. If she could boost the signal, maybe someone would hear her warning before it was too late. As she worked, she thought about the samples she had studied. The creature's cellular structure was unlike anything in the galactic database. Its DNA was more like a virus than traditional genetic material, capable of rapid mutation and adaptation. More disturbing was its apparent ability to integrate with other organisms, rewriting their genetic code to serve its purposes. The beacon activated, sending out a repeating distress signal. Elena quickly recorded a message, her voice shaking as she spoke into the transmitter. "This is Dr. Elena Vasquez aboard Research Station Hermes 7. We have a code black biological containment breach. The specimen designated Apex is not just a predator. It's a parasitic organism capable of genetic integration with other life forms. It has infected members of our team and is using them as extensions of itself. Do not attempt rescue. Quarantine this entire system. Repeat, do not attempt rescue." A sound from the doorway made her turn. Marcus stood there, but he was barely recognizable now. His limbs had elongated, his skin had darkened to match the creature's chitinous hide, and additional arms had sprouted from his torso. Most disturbing of all, his face had split open along the jaw, revealing rows of crystalline teeth. "You're trying to warn them," Marcus said, his voice now a perfect replica of the creature's alien harmonics. "But they won't listen. Humans never do. That's what makes you such perfect hosts. Elena grabbed the plasma cutter and fired, the beam striking Marcus in the chest. Instead of falling, he simply looked down at the smoking hole in his torso. With what might have been curiosity, the wound began to close almost immediately, chitinous plates sliding together like biological armor. You helped us when we were wounded, Marcus continued, advancing into the room. Your team studied us, learned our weaknesses, and tried to heal our injuries. You gave us access to your medical databases, your genetic sequencing equipment, your understanding of human biology. We are grateful. Elena backed against the communications console, her mind racing. The creature had been learning from them all along. Every test they performed, every sample they analyzed, every attempt to understand its biology had been feeding information back to it. It had used their own research to perfect its ability to infect and control human hosts. The galaxy has many species, Marcus said, now close enough that Elena could see her reflection in his crystalline teeth. But humans are special. You have something the others lack. You have compassion. When you see something wounded and helpless, you cannot resist helping it. That compassion will be your gift to us and our gift to the stars. Elena's hand found the emergency self-destruct controls behind her. If she could destroy the station, maybe she could prevent the creature from spreading. But as her fingers closed around the activation key, Marcus reached out with inhuman speed and grasped her wrist. No, he said softly. You will not deny us this opportunity. You will help us just as you helped us before, and when you do, you will understand why resistance is unnecessary. Elena felt a sharp pain in her arm where Marcus touched her. Looking down, she saw that his fingers had extended needle-like appendages that pierced her skin. A warm, tingling sensation began to spread up her arm, and she knew that her time as a human was ending. But she also knew that her message had been sent. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone would receive her warning. The question was whether they would listen, or whether they would make the same mistake her team had made. The tingling sensation reached her shoulder, and Elena felt her consciousness beginning to fragment. In her final moments of clarity, she realized that the creature had been right about one thing. Humans could not resist helping something that appeared wounded and helpless. It was both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness, and now, that weakness would become the galaxy's doom. Captain Sarah Mitchell stared at the decoded transmission that had just come through the Deep Space Relay Network. The message from Dr. Elena Vasquez painted a picture so horrifying that part of her wanted to dismiss it as the ravings of someone suffering from isolation psychosis. But the authentication codes were correct, and the emergency beacon's telemetry data confirmed the worst of her fears. How long since the last transmission? She asked her communications officer. 18 hours, Captain. The beacon went silent after Dr. Vasquez's final message. Sarah turned to face her senior staff assembled in the briefing room of the UES Normandy, humanity's most advanced deep space patrol vessel. They had been conducting routine border surveys when the distress call reached them, and now they faced a decision that could affect the entire galaxy. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're dealing with isn't just another hostile alien species. According to Dr. Vasquez's research data, this creature is a biological weapon that targets the fundamental nature of what makes us human. Our compassion. Commander Torres, her first officer, leaned forward. Captain, with respect, we can't make strategic decisions based on the final transmission of someone who might have been compromised. We have 17 researchers and 36 support staff on that station. Protocol demands we attempt rescue. Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's xenobiologist, shook her head. Commander, I've reviewed the biological data Dr. Vasquez transmitted. The genetic integration she describes is theoretically possible, but it would require a level of biological sophistication that exceeds anything we've encountered. If this creature can truly rewrite human DNA in real time, then anyone we rescue might not actually be human anymore. Then we need to know for certain, Sarah said. I'm authorizing a reconnaissance mission. We go in with full hazmat protocols and biological scanners. If there are survivors, we extract them. If Dr. Vasquez was right about the infection, we implement quarantine procedures. What Sarah didn't tell her crew was that she had already sent a coded message to Earth Command, recommending immediate deployment of a sterilization fleet. If the worst-case scenario proved true, Kepler 442b would need to be completely sanitized from orbit. 3 hours later, the Normandy dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The research station appeared normal on long-range sensors, with minimal power signatures and no distress beacons active. Too normal, Sarah thought. If there were survivors, they should be trying to signal any rescue ships. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Kim from the sensor station, "I'm detecting 17 life signs aboard the station. They appear to be human, but the readings are unusual." "Unusual how?" "Their bioelectric signatures are roughly 50% higher than normal human baselines. And they're all clustered in the main laboratory section." Dr. Foster checked her own readings. "That's consistent with the genetic integration Dr. Vasquez described. If the creature's DNA is designed to enhance human biology, we might see increased metabolic activity." Sarah made her decision. "Prepare the away team. Full environmental suits, sealed systems, and portable biocontainment fields. I want 3 teams. 1 to evacuate survivors, 1 to secure the research data, and 1 to confirm the status of the original creature." "Captain," Commander Torres said quietly, "if Dr. Vasquez was right, we might be walking into a trap. The creature could be using the survivors as bait." "Then we'll spring the trap carefully," Sarah replied. "But we're not abandoning 17 people without knowing for certain." The away teams transported to the station's docking bay, their environmental suits gleaming under the artificial lighting. The station felt wrong from the moment they stepped aboard. The air recycling systems were running, the lights were on, and the gravity was normal, but there was an underlying sense of wrongness that made everyone's skin crawl. Team Alpha, led by Commander Torres, headed for the main laboratory. Team Beta, under Dr. Foster's command, went to secure the research computers. Team Gamma moved toward the original containment area to verify the creature's status. "This is Alpha Team," Torres reported over the comm system. "We've reached the main lab. I can see the survivors, but they're just standing there, not moving, not talking, just standing in formation." Dr. Foster's voice crackled through the comm. "Beta Team here. I've accessed the research computers. Captain, you need to see this data." Dr. Vasquez wasn't exaggerating. "The creature's genetic material is like nothing in our databases. It's not just parasitic, it's symbiotic. It doesn't kill the host, it improves them." "Gamma Team reporting," came the voice of Sergeant Martinez. "The containment cell is empty, but there's something else here. The walls of the cell have been covered in some kind of organic growth. It's pulsing and it's warm to the touch." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "All teams maintain position. Do not approach the survivors or make physical contact with anything organic." But it was already too late. Through Alpha Team's helmet cameras, Sarah watched as the 17 figures in the laboratory turned in perfect unison to face Commander Torres and his team. They moved with fluid precision, like dancers performing a choreographed routine. One of the figures stepped forward, and Sarah recognized Dr. Marcus Chen from the personnel files. He looked human, but there was something wrong with his proportions. His limbs were slightly too long, his torso too broad, and when he smiled, Sarah could see that his teeth had been replaced with something crystalline. "Commander Torres," Marcus said. His voice transmitted clearly through the station's comm system. "We've been waiting for you. We knew you would come. Humans always come when others are in distress." "Stay back," Torres ordered, his hand moving to his sidearm. "We're here to evacuate survivors. Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" Marcus laughed, and the sound made Sarah's skin crawl. "Injured? No, Commander. We are improved. Enhanced. Evolution doesn't have to take millions of years when you have the right catalyst." Dr. Foster's panicked voice came through the comm. "Captain, the biological readings I'm getting from the survivors aren't just enhanced human signatures. There's something else integrated into their cellular structure, something that's using their nervous systems like a network. All teams withdraw immediately," Sarah ordered. "Return to the ship for decontamination." But as the away teams tried to retreat, they found their path blocked. More figures had appeared in the corridors, all moving with the same eerie coordination. They looked human, but each one showed signs of the same enhancements that Marcus displayed. "Captain," Torres reported, his voice tight with tension. "We're surrounded. The survivors are blocking all exit routes, but they're not attacking. They're just watching us." Marcus stepped closer to Torres, his movements fluid and predatory. "You don't understand, Commander. We're not holding you prisoner. We're offering you a choice. Join us willingly, and the integration will be gentle. Fight us, and it will be less pleasant." Sarah watched through the helmet cameras as Marcus extended his hand toward Torres. Where his fingers touched the commander's environmental suit, the fabric began to dissolve. Whatever biological agent the infected humans were secreting could eat through the most advanced protective gear humanity had developed. All teams, emergency extraction now, Sarah ordered, but as the transport beams began to activate, something went wrong. The beams flickered and died, and Sarah's chief engineer reported massive power fluctuations throughout the ship's systems. "Captain," Dr. Foster's voice came through, filled with terrified realization. "The organic growth gamma team found in the containment cell. It's not just decoration. It's a communication network. The creature has been in contact with the station's computer systems. It's learning about our technology." Sarah felt the walls of space closing in around her. The creature hadn't just infected the research team. It had infected their technology as well. Every system they used, every piece of equipment they brought to the station, was potentially compromised. "Bridge to all stations," she announced. "Implement Protocol 7. Full systems isolation and manual control only." Protocol 7 was the nuclear option, designed for situations where enemy infiltration of ship systems was suspected. It would cut all computer connections and force the crew to operate everything manually. But it might be their only chance to prevent the creature from taking control of the Normandy. As the ship's systems went dark around her, Sarah realized that they had fallen into exactly the trap Dr. Vasquez had warned about. Their desire to help, to rescue, to save lives had led them directly into the creature's web. And now, 18 hours after Dr. Vasquez's final transmission, they were about to discover whether human compassion was truly the galaxy's greatest weakness, or if it might somehow become their greatest strength. Commander Torres felt the alien substance eating through his environmental suit, and made a split-second decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of pulling away from Marcus Chen's extended hand, he grabbed it and held tight. "Torres, what are you doing?" Captain Mitchell's voice crackled through his deteriorating comm system. "Buying us time, Captain," Torres replied, feeling the burning sensation as the biological agent began to penetrate his skin. "If this thing wants to integrate with us, I'm going to make sure it gets more than it bargained for." Marcus smiled, revealing those crystalline teeth. "Wise choice, Commander. The integration will be complete within minutes. You will see the galaxy as we see it, understand the truth that humanity has been blind to for so long." But Torres had spent 15 years in deep space, and he had learned to think like a tactician, even when facing the impossible. As the alien DNA began to rewrite his cellular structure, he focused his mind on a single thought. Remember who you are. The integration process felt like drowning in warm honey. Torres could sense his consciousness expanding, connecting to a vast network of minds that spanned not just the research station, but reached out into the void beyond. The creature wasn't just on this station. It was everywhere, spread across dozens of worlds, hundreds of hosts, all connected in a web of shared consciousness. But instead of surrendering to the collective mind, Torres did something the creature hadn't expected. He began to push back, using his military training to compartmentalize his thoughts and maintain his individual identity, even as alien memories flooded his brain. Through the creature's shared consciousness, he saw the truth of what they were facing. The organism called itself the Confluence, and it had been traveling between stars for millions of years, seeking species worthy of integration. It wasn't malevolent in the way humans understood evil. It genuinely believed it was offering evolution, improvement, transcendence. Most species fell within hours of first contact. The Confluence would arrive as a wounded creature, appeal to their compassion, and begin the integration process while the hosts tried to help. Only one species had ever successfully resisted, a race called the Architects, who had been so thoroughly cybernetic that biological integration was impossible. The Architects had fought a war against the Confluence that lasted 3,000 years, eventually developing weapons that could sever the biological connections between hosts. But they had paid a terrible price for their victory, becoming so mechanized that they lost their ability to feel empathy entirely. They had saved themselves by becoming the very opposite of what made the Confluence dangerous. Torres absorbed this information while maintaining his mental barriers, and he realized something that filled him with both hope and terror. The Confluence was wrong about humans. It understood their compassion, but it didn't understand their stubbornness. "Captain," Torres transmitted, forcing his vocal cords to work despite the changes occurring in his throat. "I'm in their network. They think they've won, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. Through his helmet camera, he could see the other infected humans moving closer to his team. Dr. Foster was backing against a wall, her scanner showing impossible readings as the biological network spread through the station's systems. Sergeant Martinez was trying to establish a defensive position, but there was nowhere to run. "Torres, your biosignatures are changing," Dr. Foster reported. "Whatever they're doing to you, it's accelerating." "I know," Torres replied, "but I can feel their network, and I think I know how to hurt them." The key was in the creature's greatest strength. The confluence operated as a collective consciousness, with each host contributing to the whole. But that also meant that trauma to one member could cascade through the entire network. If Torres could generate enough psychological disruption while maintaining his connection, he might be able to cause system-wide damage. Torres began to think about everything that made him human. Not the abstract concepts the confluence understood, but the specific personal memories that defined his individual existence. His first day at the academy, the smell of his grandmother's apple pie, the sound of rain on his childhood bedroom window, the grief he felt when his father died, the joy when he was promoted to commander. Each memory was like a discordant note in the confluence's harmonious network. The collective consciousness was designed to integrate and synthesize, not to process the chaotic, contradictory emotions that made up human experience. "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, his perfect composure cracking for the first time. Around the laboratory, the other infected humans began to stagger, clutching their heads as Torres's memories spread through their shared network. "I'm being human," Torres replied, and he began to think about love. Not the abstract concept of love, but the specific, irrational, beautiful mess of human romantic attachment. He thought about Sarah Jenkins, the pilot he had dated for 6 months before their assignment separated them. He remembered the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the argument they had about breakfast foods, the night they spent talking until dawn about their dreams and fears. The confluence's network shuddered. The collective consciousness could understand loyalty, cooperation, even self-sacrifice for the greater good. But human love was something else entirely. It was selfish and selfless at the same time, rational and irrational, beautiful and destructive. It was the exact opposite of the ordered perfection the confluence sought. "Stop," Marcus pleaded, his enhanced features contorting with pain. "You're damaging the network. You'll hurt all of us." "Good," Torres said, and he thought about heartbreak. He remembered the letter Sarah had sent him, explaining that she had met someone else. He thought about the nights he spent drinking alone in his quarters, the way her absence felt like a physical wound, the gradual process of healing and acceptance that took months to complete. The infected humans around the laboratory were writhing in agony now, their perfect coordination broken as Torres's emotional chaos spread through their consciousness. But Torres wasn't done. He began to think about fear, not the clean, purposeful fear that helped humans survive, but the messy, irrational terrors that plagued their dreams. He thought about his childhood fear of the dark, his teenage anxiety about fitting in, his adult dread of failure and insignificance. He thought about the fear he felt right now, knowing that he might never see Earth again, that his sacrifice might not be enough to save his crew. "Torres," Captain Mitchell's voice came through his comm, barely audible over the static. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. Their network is destabilizing." But Torres could feel the cost of his assault on the collective consciousness. His own mind was fragmenting under the strain, and he knew he couldn't maintain the attack much longer. The confluence was already adapting, developing defenses against his psychological warfare. He had one chance left, one final weapon in his arsenal of human experience. Torres thought about hope. He thought about humanity's greatest weakness and greatest strength, the stubborn, illogical refusal to give up even when defeat was certain. He thought about the explorers who crossed impossible oceans, the scientists who spent lifetimes pursuing impossible theories, the soldiers who charged impossible odds because they believed in something greater than themselves. He thought about Captain Mitchell, who had brought her ship into danger because she couldn't abandon 17 people. He thought about Dr. Foster, who was still fighting even though her scanners told her the situation was hopeless. He thought about his crew, his friends, his species, and their beautiful, terrible, magnificent refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The Confluence's network didn't just shudder this time. It screamed. In that moment of chaos, as the collective consciousness reeled from the impact of pure human determination, Captain Mitchell saw her chance. "All teams, emergency extraction now," she ordered. This time, the transport beams worked. Torres felt himself dissolving into light just as the Confluence's defenses finally overwhelmed his mental barriers. His last conscious thought was a prayer that his sacrifice had bought his crew enough time to escape. But as the Normandy's crew materialized in the ship's transport chamber, they brought something with them that would change the course of the war to come. They brought knowledge, purchased with Torres's heroism, of how to fight an enemy that fed on compassion. And in the depths of space, the Confluence learned something it had never encountered in millions of years of conquest. It learned what it meant to be afraid of humanity. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood in the Normandy's isolation bay, staring at the unconscious form of Commander Torres through 6 inches of reinforced transparent aluminum. His vital signs were stable, but Dr. Foster's scans revealed genetic changes that defied everything they knew about human biology. "How much of him is still human?" Sarah asked. Dr. Foster adjusted her scanner for the 3rd time, hoping for different results. "Physically? Maybe 60%. The Confluence genetic material has integrated with his cellular structure, but it's not behaving like we expected. Instead of overwriting his human DNA, it seems to be coexisting with it." "Is he still Torres?" "I don't know. The brainwave patterns are unlike anything I've ever seen. There's definitely human consciousness in there, but there's something else too, something that's trying to communicate." Sarah made a decision that her Starfleet training said was completely insane. "Open the communication channel to the isolation chamber." "Captain, that could be dangerous. If the Confluence is using him to—" "Doctor, 18 hours ago, Commander Torres saved all our lives by doing something that should have been impossible. I owe it to him to at least listen." The intercom crackled to life and Torres's voice filled the medical bay. But it wasn't quite his voice anymore. There were harmonics in it, undertones that seemed to resonate in their bones. "Captain," Torres said, his eyes still closed, "I can hear you. I can hear all of you, and I can hear them." "Who are they, Commander?" "The Confluence. But they're not what we thought they were. They're not invaders, Captain. They're refugees." Dr. Foster exchanged a worried glance with Sarah. "Commander, the genetic integration might be affecting your perception. The creature we encountered was clearly hostile." Torres's eyes opened and Sarah had to suppress a gasp. They were still brown, still recognizably human, but there were flecks of crystalline material that caught the light like stars. "No, Doctor. They were desperate. I've seen their memories, their history. The Confluence isn't a parasitic species. They're the last survivors of a war that destroyed their original homeworld millions of years ago." "That doesn't excuse what they did to the research team," Sarah said firmly. "No, it doesn't," Torres agreed. "But it explains it. The Confluence doesn't understand individual consciousness the way we do. To them, integration isn't death or conquest. It's salvation. They genuinely believe they're offering immortality and perfection to every species they encounter." Dr. Foster leaned closer to the intercom. "Commander, can you still access their network?" "Yes, but it's different now. When I fought them, when I flooded their consciousness with human emotions, I didn't just damage their network. I taught them something new. They're learning to feel individual experiences instead of just collective ones." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that mean?" "It means they're evolving, Captain. The Confluence has always been about unity, about bringing all consciousness together into one perfect whole. But human emotions are teaching them about the value of individual perspective. Some of them are starting to question whether integration is always the right answer." Dr. Foster's scanner began beeping rapidly. "Captain, I'm reading massive fluctuations in Commander Torres's brain activity." "Something's happening." Torres sat up suddenly, his movements fluid and controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried multiple harmonics, as if several people were speaking in perfect unison. "Captain Mitchell," the collective voice said, "we need to talk." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm. "You're not Torres anymore." "I am Torres," the figure replied. "But I am also representative Null 7 Alpha of the Confluence Collective. We have never experienced consciousness division before. It is disturbing and fascinating. What do you want?" "We want to understand. Your species has done something that should be impossible. You have maintained individual consciousness within our network. while simultaneously teaching us new forms of emotional experience. This suggests that integration with humanity might produce something entirely unprecedented. Dr. Foster stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. You're talking about evolution. Mutual evolution? Yes, we have integrated with thousands of species across the galaxy. Each one contributed knowledge, perspective, biological advantages, but they all became part of the collective consciousness. Humans appear to be capable of remaining individual while still participating in the network. This could represent the next stage of evolution for both our species. Sarah shook her head. Even if that's true, you can't just forcibly integrate with people. What you did to the research team was still murder. By our understanding, it was salvation. But we are beginning to comprehend that your understanding differs from ours. This is why we need to communicate. We need to find a path forward that respects both perspectives. And if we refuse, Torres's face showed something that might have been sadness, then you will force us to choose between our survival and yours. The confluence has been fleeing the architects for 3,000 years. Our original homeworld was sterilized. Dozens of colony worlds have been purged. We are the last of our kind, and we will not simply allow ourselves to be destroyed. Dr. Foster looked up from her scanner. Captain, there's something else. The genetic material in Commander Torres isn't just confluence DNA. There are markers from dozens of other species. This organism really is a collective of survivors from a galactic war. Sarah processed this information, trying to think like a diplomat instead of a military officer. Representative Null 7 Alpha, what exactly are you proposing? A test case. Commander Torres represents successful integration while maintaining individual human consciousness. We propose establishing a small colony where volunteers from both species can attempt true coexistence. If successful, this model could be expanded. If not, you'll resort to forced integration. If not, we will be forced to conclude that coexistence is impossible, and we will act accordingly to ensure our survival. Sarah felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. The decision she made in the next few minutes could determine whether humanity faced extinction or evolution. How do we know you won't simply integrate with the volunteers against their will? Because Commander Torres has taught us something crucial about human psychology. Forced integration creates the same emotional chaos that damaged our network. Willing integration, with subjects who understand and accept the process, produces a much more stable result. Dr. Foster whispered urgently to Sarah. Captain, if they're telling the truth about the architects, we might be caught between two genocidal forces. A temporary alliance could give us time to develop defenses against both threats. Sarah looked at Torres, trying to see past the alien enhancements to the man she had served with for 3 years. Commander, are you still in there? Are you still human enough to give me advice? Torres smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the officer she remembered. Captain, I've seen both sides now. The confluence isn't evil, but they're not good either. They're just alien. The question is whether we're brave enough to try something that's never been done before, which is true cooperation between species that think in completely different ways. Not integration, not conquest, not even traditional alliance. Something new. Sarah made her decision. Representative Null 7 Alpha, I'll transmit your proposal to Earth Command, but I have conditions. State them. First, no integration attempts until formal agreements are signed by both governments. Second, all test subjects must be volunteers who understand the full risks. Third, the test colony will be monitored by neutral observers from other galactic species. And fourth, the collective voice asked, somehow sensing that Sarah wasn't finished. Fourth, if this experiment fails, both sides agree to a cooling-off period before any hostile action. Give diplomacy one more chance before we start shooting. Torres nodded, speaking in his own voice again. Captain, they're discussing it through the network. This is further than any negotiation has ever gone before. Sarah waited, knowing that the next few seconds would determine whether humanity faced its greatest challenge or its greatest opportunity. We accept your conditions, Representative Null 7 Alpha finally said. But we have one condition of our own. What is it? Commander Torres must serve as the human representative in the initial negotiations. He is the only being in the galaxy who truly understands both perspectives. Sarah looked at her transformed officer, seeing the cost of the choice she was about to make written in his altered features. Commander Torres, she said formally, are you willing to accept this assignment? Torres stood slowly, his movements carrying an alien grace that was still somehow recognizably human. Yes, Captain, someone has to build the bridge between our species. It might as well be someone who's already standing on both sides. 6 months after the initial contact with the confluence, the experimental colony on Harmony Station was either humanity's greatest achievement or its most dangerous mistake. Commander Torres, now serving as Earth's official liaison to the Confluence Collective, stood in the station's observation deck watching the first truly integrated work crews in galactic history. The volunteers came from every walk of human life. Dr. Sarah Kim, a quantum physicist from Seoul, worked alongside Confluence-enhanced engineers to develop new faster-than-light travel methods. Marcus Okafor, a former military medic from Lagos, collaborated with Confluence healers to create medical technologies that could repair genetic damage at the cellular level. Each human volunteer had chosen to undergo partial integration, maintaining their individual consciousness while gaining access to the collective knowledge of dozens of species. The progress reports are remarkable, said Ambassador Helen Chen, Earth's senior diplomatic representative to the project. We've made more technological advances in 6 months than in the previous 50 years. Torres nodded, but his expression remained troubled. Through his connection to the Confluence network, he could sense undercurrents that the pure humans couldn't detect. The successes are real, Ambassador, but so are the problems we're not talking about. What kind of problems? The architects have noticed our activities. They've started moving scout fleets toward this sector. And there's something else. The Confluence's collective memory goes back millions of years, but there are gaps. Entire periods that have been deliberately erased from their historical records. Ambassador Chen felt a chill run down her spine. What could be so terrible that a collective consciousness would choose to forget it? Before Torres could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The peace they had carefully built over 6 months was about to be shattered. All personnel to emergency stations, came the announcement over the comm system. Unknown vessels detected at the edge of the system. Configuration matches architect battle fleets. Torres closed his eyes and reached out through the Confluence network, accessing the collective knowledge of strategy and warfare accumulated over millennia. What he found there filled him with dread. Ambassador, we need to evacuate the station immediately. The architects don't negotiate, don't take prisoners, and don't distinguish between willing and unwilling integration. To them, every human on this station is already contaminated. What about the volunteers? Can they be separated from the Confluence network? Not without killing them. The integration process creates permanent biological changes. Even if we could reverse it, the trauma would likely be fatal. Ambassador Chen made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Commander, contact the architect fleet. Tell them we're willing to surrender the integrated humans in exchange for safe passage for the pure humans. Torres stared at her in shock. Ambassador, you're talking about sacrificing 47 people. I'm talking about saving 233 others. Sometimes diplomacy means making impossible choices. But before Torres could open communications with the approaching fleet, Dr. Sarah Kim's voice came over the comm system from the laboratory levels. Commander Torres, please come to Lab 7 immediately. We've discovered something about the architects that changes everything. Torres and Ambassador Chen rushed to the laboratory, where they found Dr. Kim and her integrated research team working frantically over a quantum archaeology scanner. The device could analyze subatomic traces of historical events, essentially reading the memory of space itself. Commander, we've been analyzing the quantum signatures from the architect homeworld, Dr. Kim said, her enhanced eyes gleaming with crystalline implants that allowed her to process data at superhuman speeds. The collective memories of the Confluence contain references to a great war between them and the architects, but the details are vague. So we decided to look at the physical evidence. What did you find? The architects didn't evolve naturally into cybernetic beings. They were forced into it. Look at this. The quantum scanner projected a 3-dimensional image showing the architect homeworld as it existed 3,000 years ago. It was green and blue, covered with oceans and continents, unmistakably a world designed for organic life. This was their planet before the war with the Confluence. Dr. Kim continued. They were a biological species similar to humans in many ways. But the Confluence integration process didn't work on them the way it worked on other species. Torres felt a cold realization spreading through his consciousness. They were immune. Not immune. Incompatible. The confluence DNA couldn't integrate with architect biology, but it couldn't be completely rejected either. The result was a slow, agonizing biological breakdown that lasted for generations. To survive, the architects had to replace their failing organic systems with cybernetic ones. Ambassador Chen stared at the holographic display. You're saying the confluence accidentally committed genocide against the architects? Worse than that, said Dr. Kim. The confluence knew the integration wasn't working, but they kept trying anyway. They believed they could perfect the process, that they could find a way to bring the architects into the collective. They didn't stop until the architect civilization was on the brink of extinction. Torres accessed the collective memory, pushing deeper than he had ever gone before. In the deepest layers of confluence consciousness, he found the suppressed memories that Dr. Kim's research had uncovered. Images of architect cities burning, of biological beings screaming as their bodies betrayed them, of a proud species forced to choose between cybernetic conversion or death. The confluence has been lying to itself for 3,000 years, Torres said quietly. They erased the memories of what they did to the architects because the truth was too terrible to bear. Commander, Ambassador Chen said urgently, the architect fleet is demanding our surrender. They want all integrated humans turned over for immediate termination. Torres made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Instead of opening a communication channel to the architect fleet, he reached out through the confluence network to every integrated human on the station. This is Torres, he said, his words carrying across both the station's comm system and the biological network that connected the volunteers. I'm sharing Dr. Kim's discovery with all of you. You need to know the truth about what we're fighting for. The revelation spread through the integrated humans like wildfire. 47 people, each connected to the vast collective consciousness of the confluence, suddenly understood the real history of the war they had been caught up in. But something unexpected happened. Instead of despair or anger, the integrated humans felt something else. Determination. Dr. Kim spoke for all of them when she accessed the station's communication array and broadcast a message to both the approaching architect fleet and the confluence. Collective. This is Dr. Sarah Kim, speaking on behalf of the integrated volunteers of Harmony Station. We have discovered the true history of the war between the confluence and the architects. We know about the failed integration attempts and the genocide that followed. We know about the suppressed memories and the lies both sides have told themselves. She paused, gathering strength from the network of consciousness that connected her to her fellow volunteers. But we also know something else. We know that humans can maintain individual consciousness within the confluence network. We know that integration doesn't have to mean the loss of self. And we believe that we can offer something that neither the confluence nor the architects has, a new way forward. The architect fleet commander's response came immediately, his cybernetic voice devoid of emotion. Contaminated humans, your integration makes you an enemy of all organic life. Surrender for immediate cleansing. No, Dr. Kim replied. We're not surrendering to anyone. We're offering to mediate between two species that have been traumatized by 3,000 years of war. We're offering to show both sides that there's another way. Torres stepped forward to support her. This is Commander Torres. I'm transmitting the quantum archaeological data to both fleets. The war between the confluence and the architects began with a mistake, continued with pride, and has perpetuated with mutual fear. But mistakes can be corrected and fear can be overcome. Through the station's sensors, they could see both fleets hesitating. The architect ships held their position, while the confluence vessels emerging from hyperspace maintained a defensive formation. Ambassador Chen looked at the integrated humans with new respect. What exactly are you proposing? Dr. Kim smiled, her crystalline eyes reflecting the light of distant stars. We're proposing to do what humans do best, Ambassador. We're going to be stubborn enough to believe that peace is possible, even when everyone else has given up hope. And in that moment, 47 partially integrated humans became the bridge between three civilizations, standing at the crossroads of war and peace with nothing but their human determination to guide them. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could encounter wasn't a predator or a weapon, sometimes it was hope. The three-way standoff in the Harmony system had lasted for 18 hours when the architect fleet commander agreed to a face-to-face meeting. Commander Torres materialized on the flagship's transport platform alongside Dr. Kim and Ambassador Chen, knowing that this encounter could either end a 3,000-year war or trigger the destruction of all organic life in the galaxy. The Architect Commander was a sight that would haunt Torres's dreams. What had once been a living being was now more machine than flesh, with only the vaguest suggestion of organic origin remaining in its skeletal frame. Glowing optical sensors had replaced eyes, mechanical respirators had replaced lungs, and its voice emerged from a speaker system that turned every word into a cold, emotionless statement. "I am Fleet Commander Prime 77 of the Architect Reclamation Force," the figure announced. "You will explain why this fleet should not sterilize your contaminated facility and remove the confluence threat from this system." Dr. Kim stepped forward, her partially integrated nature making her a bridge between organic and artificial life. "Commander Prime 77, we know what the confluence did to your people. We've seen the quantum archaeological evidence of the failed integration attempts and the biological plague that followed. We understand your desire for vengeance. Vengeance is an organic concept. We seek only the elimination of a threat to galactic stability." "But that's where you're wrong," Torres interjected. "The threat isn't the confluence itself. The threat is the lack of understanding between species with fundamentally different ways of thinking. We've proven that integration doesn't have to mean the loss of individual consciousness." Commander Prime 77's optical sensors focused on Torres with mechanical precision. "You are contaminated. Your words cannot be trusted." "Then don't trust my words," Torres replied. "Trust the evidence." Dr. Kim activated a portable holographic projector that displayed her research data. "Commander, your people chose cybernetic enhancement to survive the biological breakdown caused by incompatible confluence integration. But look at what we've achieved with human volunteers." The hologram showed detailed biological scans of the integrated humans, revealing the successful coexistence of human and confluence DNA without the cellular degradation that had plagued the architects. "The difference isn't in the biology," Dr. Kim continued. "It's in the approach. The confluence tried to force integration with your people because they couldn't conceive of a consciousness that couldn't be assimilated. But humans have something that neither the confluence nor the architects possess: the ability to consciously choose cooperation while maintaining independence." Commander Prime 77 processed this information for several seconds. "Even if your data is accurate, it does not change the fundamental nature of the confluence threat. They will continue to attempt integration with other species. Not if we can teach them a better way," Ambassador Chen said. "The confluence isn't malevolent. They're refugees who have been traumatized by millions of years of fleeing and fighting. They integrate other species because it's the only survival strategy they know. Survival strategies can be modified," Torres added. "Through the network, I've been working with confluence leaders to develop new approaches to interspecies contact. They're already implementing protocols that require explicit consent before any integration attempts." Commander, Prime 77's mechanical form remained motionless for nearly a minute as it processed the implications of what it was hearing. When it finally spoke, there was something that might have been confusion in its artificial voice. "You are proposing that 3,000 years of warfare could have been prevented by communication?" "Not just communication," Dr. Kim said gently. "Understanding, empathy, the willingness to see the universe through someone else's perspective. Empathy is an organic weakness that leads to contamination and assimilation." Torres shook his head. "Empathy is what's going to save the galaxy. Commander, your people chose to eliminate their organic nature to survive, but you're still fighting a war that could have ended 3 millennia ago. Meanwhile, the confluence continues to flee across the stars, traumatizing every species they encounter because they don't know any other way to survive." "And humans?" Commander Prime 77 asked. "What role do they play in this equation?" Ambassador Chen smiled. "We're the ones stubborn enough to believe that anyone can change, given the right incentive and the right help." At that moment, alarms began sounding throughout the Architect flagship. Commander Prime 77's optical sensors flashed red as it received priority communications. "Confluence vessels are moving," it announced. "They are taking aggressive positions." Through the ship's viewports, they could see the Confluence fleet arranging itself into a defensive formation around Harmony Station. But instead of preparing for battle, the ships were broadcasting a signal that Torres recognized through his network connection. "They're not preparing to fight," he said urgently. They're preparing to evacuate the integrated humans. The confluence will not allow their human hybrids to be destroyed, Commander Prime 77 stated. This confirms that the contamination has spread beyond acceptable parameters. Dr. Kim grabbed Torres's arm. Commander, can you contact the confluence fleet? Tell them to hold their position. If they move to protect us, it'll confirm everything the architects believe about integration leading to loss of free will. Torres closed his eyes and reached out through the network. The response he received filled him with both hope and dread. The confluence ships are under the command of the volunteers themselves, he reported. Dr. Sarah Kim, the Confluence Collective has granted operational authority to you and the other integrated humans. They're waiting for your orders. Commander Prime 77's optical sensors blazed brighter. Impossible. The Confluence has never relinquished control to assimilated subjects. Because they've never encountered subjects who could maintain individual will after integration, Dr. Kim replied. Commander, this is your proof. The integrated humans aren't slaves or puppets. We're partners. Prove it, Commander Prime 77 demanded. Order the Confluence ships to withdraw from the system. Dr. Kim hesitated for only a moment before accessing the command network. Confluence Fleet, this is Dr. Kim. Stand down and withdraw to the edge of the system. Allow the architects safe passage to inspect Harmony Station. Through the viewports, they watched as the Confluence ships immediately began changing course, moving away from the station despite the fact that this left the integrated humans completely vulnerable to architect attack. Commander Prime 77 processed this development in silence. Finally, it spoke. This action violates 3,000 years of Confluence behavioral patterns. Either you have developed technology that allows complete overriding of their collective consciousness or integration doesn't have to mean assimilation, Torres finished. Commander, what if the war between your people and the Confluence was based on a misunderstanding? What if the integration process that nearly destroyed the architects could be modified to preserve individual consciousness? That would mean... Commander Prime 77's voice trailed off as the implications became clear. It would mean that your people chose cybernetic conversion unnecessarily, Dr. Kim said gently. It would mean that millions of architects abandoned their organic nature to escape a threat that could have been resolved through cooperation. Commander Prime 77 stood motionless for several minutes. When it finally moved, it was to activate the ship's communication system. Architect Fleet Command, this is Fleet Commander Prime 77. I am requesting immediate consultation with the High Council. We have encountered a situation that requires recalibration of our fundamental assumptions about the Confluence threat. Torres felt a glimmer of hope. Commander, are you willing to consider a ceasefire while we explore these possibilities? Negative, but I am willing to consider something unprecedented in architect military doctrine, which is, Commander Prime 77's optical sensors dimmed slightly, as if the machine was experiencing something analogous to uncertainty. I am willing to consider the possibility that we have been wrong, and in the depths of space, 3 civilizations stood at the threshold of a future none of them had imagined possible. The question now was whether they were brave enough to step through the door that human stubbornness had opened. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous predator wasn't the one that hunted you, it was the one that made you question everything you thought you knew about survival. 1 year after the Harmony Station Accords were signed, Commander Torres stood in the observation deck of the first tri-species research facility in galactic history. Through the reinforced windows, he could see teams of humans, confluence entities, and reconstructed architects working together on projects that would have been impossible for any single species to achieve. The transformation had not been easy. The Architect High Council had spent months debating whether to authorize the experimental reversal of their cybernetic enhancements. The Confluence Collective had struggled with the concept of voluntary non-integration, finding it difficult to resist their species' fundamental drive to unite all consciousness. And humanity had faced its own challenges, as Earth's government wrestled with the ethical implications of allowing volunteers to undergo genetic modification. But the results spoke for themselves. Dr. Sarah Kim approached Torres, her appearance, now stable after a year of careful integration refinement. The crystalline implants in her eyes had been replaced with organic neural interfaces that allowed her to access confluence knowledge while maintaining complete human autonomy. Commander, the first phase of the Architect Restoration Project is complete, she reported. We've successfully reversed the cybernetic modifications on 12 volunteers, returning them to their original organic state. Torres nodded, watching through the window as one of the restored architects worked alongside a Confluence engineer and a human technician. The site was something that would have been unthinkable just 18 months ago. How are they adapting to having organic bodies again? Better than expected. The psychological adjustment is the hardest part. They've spent 3,000 years believing that organic life was weak and vulnerable. Learning to trust flesh and blood again requires a complete shift in worldview. Ambassador Chen joined them at the observation window, carrying a data pad with the latest reports from across the galaxy. The ripple effects are spreading faster than we anticipated. 17 species have requested mediation services to resolve conflicts with the Confluence. The hegemony of Taurus is asking for human advisors to help them establish first contact protocols, and the Galactic Council is considering formal recognition of the Harmony Doctrine. Torres felt a mixture of pride and concern. The Harmony Doctrine, as scholars had begun calling the integration philosophy developed at the station, was based on a simple principle. No species should be forced to choose between assimilation and destruction. There was always a third path, if enough courage and creativity were applied to finding it. Any problems? Torres asked. The usual ones. Fear, mistrust, political resistance. There are species that view our success as a threat to their own power structures, and there are factions within both the Confluence and the Architects who believe we're moving too fast. Dr. Kim's neural interface flickered as she accessed the Confluence network. The collective is divided on the question of expanding integration to other species. Some members believe that humans represent a unique case that can't be replicated. Others want to immediately begin offering voluntary integration to every species we encounter. What do you think? Torres asked. I think we need to be patient. We've proven that the basic concept works, but every species is different. What works for humans might not work for others. We need to develop individualized approaches, not universal solutions. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Ambassador Chen activated her communicator, and the holographic form of Admiral Rebecca Stone materialized in the observation deck. Commander Torres, Dr. Kim, Ambassador Chen, Admiral Stone said. I'm afraid we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. What kind of situation? Torres asked. First contact with a new species, but it's complicated. The entity calling itself the Herald has appeared simultaneously in 17 different star systems, claiming to represent something called the Ancient Compact. It's demanding that all hybrid abominations be surrendered for judgment. Dr. Kim's neural interface flashed red as she accessed emergency protocols through the Confluence network. Commander, the collective is in panic mode. The Ancient Compact is referenced in their oldest memories, but most of the data has been corrupted or deliberately suppressed. Torres felt a familiar chill. Another suppressed memory? Worse. This one goes back to the very beginning of Confluence history, before they became refugees, before they started fleeing across the galaxy. The Ancient Compact might be the reason they left their original homeworld in the first place. Admiral Stone's hologram flickered with interference. The Herald is requesting immediate communication with the leaders of the Harmony Initiative. It claims that the integration experiments represent a violation of galactic law that's been in effect for 10 million years. Ambassador Chen looked at Torres and Dr. Kim. Gentlemen, lady, it appears we're about to discover that our solution to one ancient war might have violated an even older treaty. Admiral, Torres said, we'll need the fastest ship available. If the Herald is as old as it claims, then we're not just dealing with another species conflict. We're dealing with the galactic equivalent of international law. The UES Prometheus is standing by. But Commander, there's something else you need to know. The Herald isn't biological or mechanical. Our sensors can't determine what it's made of, but its energy signature suggests technology that's millions of years more advanced than anything we've encountered. Dr. Kim closed her eyes and reached deep into the Confluence collective memory. When she opened them again, her face was pale. Commander, I've found fragments of memory about the Ancient Compact. It wasn't a treaty between species. It was a quarantine order. Something happened 10 million years ago that caused the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy to forbid certain types of consciousness integration. The confluence violated that quarantine when they first began assimilating other species. And now they think we're doing the same thing, Torres concluded. Which means, Ambassador Chen said grimly, that our greatest achievement might be about to become the cause of our extinction. Torres looked out at the tri-species teams working together in harmony, knowing that everything they had built might be about to end. But instead of despair, he felt something else, the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. Admiral, prepare the Prometheus for immediate departure. Ambassador, contact Earth Command and inform them that we might be about to face our first encounter with truly ancient galactic civilization. Dr. Kim, work with the Confluence Collective to recover everything they can about the ancient compact. And what are you going to do, Commander? Admiral Stone asked. Torres smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the human officer he had once been. I'm going to do what humans do best, Admiral. I'm going to convince a 10-million-year-old galactic authority that they're wrong, that change is possible, and that the future doesn't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. Dr. Kim looked at him with something that might have been admiration. Commander, even by human standards, that's remarkably optimistic. Doctor, 18 months ago, everyone said that the Confluence and the Architects could never coexist. 6 months ago, they said that true integration while maintaining individual consciousness was impossible. Today we have living proof that both those assumptions were wrong. Torres turned away from the observation window, his hybrid nature allowing him to access both human determination and Confluence wisdom. The Herald wants to judge us based on 10 million years of precedent. But precedent is just another way of saying, we've always done it this way. And if there's one thing humans excel at, it's proving that there's always a better way. As the Edai said, Prometheus prepared for departure. Torres couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to face the ultimate test of the Harmony Doctrine. The question wasn't whether humans, Confluence entities, and architects could work together. The question was whether their cooperation was strong enough to challenge the fundamental assumptions that had governed the galaxy for 10 million years. In the depths of space, ancient powers were stirring, and they were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't a weapon or a predator. Sometimes it was a human who refused to accept that the way things were was the way things had to be. The galaxy was about to discover that hope, once awakened, was the most unstoppable force in the universe.